Welcome, welcome. So I know everybody is just getting set up here. We'll have folks joining in. I think almost 300 people registered for this. So hot topic. We're really excited about it. Welcome. My name is Jeremy Barton. I go by JB, and I am on the founding team here at Sidebar. Our mission with Sidebar, if you don't know us, is to connect leaders and catalyze your extraordinary success. So everything we do is about making you successful in your career. And we're so excited to spend some time today as a group. Um, we are going to do, we love doing these formats, right? Sidebar is all about connect people and really leaning into the power of peers. We love doing conversations like this. If you've never been in a sidebar peer circle, this is a great opportunity to kind of really see what the power of being in a forum like that is, because we're going to dive into this really important topic that I think is on everybody's minds. Just in the context of really the economic shifts that we see in the market, as senior leaders, how do we start to think about this awesome new technology of AI and incorporating that into what we do, what our teams are doing? We're going to unpack that topic in this awesome setting. So buckle up. It's going to be great. I am going to pass it to the one and only Jenny. She is going to lead the conversation here. She is an expert facilitator for Sidebar. And so you will see not only the power of peers, but what it's like when you have an amazing facilitator who guides the conversation. So welcome, everybody. I know folks are still piling in, but with that, Jenny, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, JB. Welcome, everybody. Excited to give you all an inside look at a sidebar circle. This is real leaders with real questions and real peer coaching. We're going to run this session with two main activities. We're going to have one discussion that we like to call Conversation Cafe, where we'll all respond to a discussion topic and take 2 rounds to discuss. And then we'll have our problem-solving process called a solve, where we'll model how peers help each other move forward. Just a quick note to say that our typical sidebar sessions are 90 minutes. We're going to run these 2 activities in under 60 minutes. So we're going to be a little bit fast and furious. So for those of you who have been in Sidebar, you know that we really stress the skill of bottom lining. That's really thinking about what we're going to say and making our words count. So that's going to be really important today. And before we jump into the core of today's session, let's take a few moments to introduce ourselves so we're all aware of who is in this wonderful fishbowl today. I'll put the prompt in the chat here. So we're going to have the order of intros here, starting with Emily. And I want you to say your name, your current role or focus, and just so we get to know you, what's a fear you know is kind of silly, but you have anyway? And mine is, being afraid that I'm always going to run out of gas. So my gas tank never has less than a quarter tank. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Jordan. I am the former CMO and current SVP of growth of a company called MIDI Health. We're a Series C startup in the women's health space. Um, so I thought about this, and it's not something I am irrationally fearful of, but it's actually my husband is irrationally fearful of me running out of food because I get really hangry. And so he always has a granola bar in his pocket and in our car. It's like I'm a 5-year-old, basically.
Thanks. Over to you, Jake.
Yeah, hey, Jason Copeland. I advise a bunch of startups at Stanford's incubator StartX, and also run a consulting company called Silicon Valley Intelligence Group. Yeah, one fear I have, I'm talking to a friend about social yesterday, is like Facebook took away all my friends in real life, and I wonder if AI is going to do the same thing.
Rahul. Thank you, Jason.
Hey all, I'm Rahul Ramkumar. I'm the head of product for a company called Rocket.new. We're a seed stage vibe coding startup. Well, it's a little weird. Like, I'm a huge fan of theme parks. So one of my biggest fears is that, all the theme parks are going to close down before I can hit, all of them across the country, across the world, which I know hopefully is not going to happen. So but that's a little bit of me.
Thank you, Sue.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Balagodu. I help founders and growth companies with go-to-market strategies. I'm a product and tech exec who's just moved to go-to-market. I'm also the managing partner of a boutique firm called Intellectus Advisors, and we work with companies to adopt AI agents. The question was, the silly fear I have is that I have to parallel park when I go into the city, and I do not do a good job at it. So wherever I have to go, I turn up at least 20 minutes early. So if I have to park far away, I'll walk or I'll take a cab. So yeah.
Thank you. Ha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ha Nguyen. I'm the managing partner of Next Step. We are a fractional COO startup consulting group. I've been in Silicon Valley tech 25 years. Now I have zero desire to join any more companies, but I really love helping founders build companies from the ground up. I've been involved both as a member and working alongside the Sidebar team for 2.5 years now. And I have been a big believer of the mission since the beginning. And then I think about a 1.5 years ago, Lexi, the founder and CEO, asked me to step into the role of head of community. And I do that in Sidebar sort of on a part-time basis. While I'm working with a couple of other founders to help them build their companies too. So excited to be here. In terms of unfounded fear or irrational fear, I think for me, it's running out of money. Because I'm a refugee immigrant, grew up super, super poor. Maybe I'm not as crazy as my mom, who like penny pinches every cent, even though she's fine. There's a little bit of that sort of, growing up poor refugee immigrant mentality that I still hold with me. So
Thank you for sharing that, Ha. I relate. All right. Now that we all know each other, we have such an impressive panel here today. Let's dive into our discussion. So we're going to have 2 rounds here where I'm going to share the provocation, and then we'll have everybody share briefly, and then we will all respond afterwards. Okay, and see what surprises us. So here's the provocation. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not very fearful and 5 is the most fearful, how fearful are you about staying relevant in your work today, and why? And I'm going to put the orders of shares here. Ha, would you like to kick us off, please?
oh my gosh, you're gonna have me to kick off. So it's interesting because I think about a year ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said that I'm not fearful at all. I would probably put myself on a 1 or 2 scale of 5. And then these days I actually feel like I'm 4, and some days I feel like I'm closer to a 5 in terms of fearfulness. So a few things. Number one, I'm just seeing what's happening in the market today. I have a big network. I talk to a lot of my friends, some of them who have been out of work for a year or more. I do think AI is taking away jobs. I do probably starting to move from being a techno optimist to a techno pessimist. I do see, in being in venture, I feel this acutely, that there's less funding going into startups. And so and then I feel like AI is moving faster than the rate that any of us can learn. And for me, I'm so busy with like client work and everything else that's going on in my life that I just don't have enough time to upskill. So it's funny, I wrote my business partner the other day, and I was like, I think I need to leave tech or take a sabbatical from tech, because I just don't know, like in the future, if I'm ever going to be hireable anymore. So those are my fears. I don't know that they're irrational right now. They might be very rational. And so I moved from like 1 or 2 on a 5-point scale a year or so ago to now I'm like, oh, I'm a lot more fearful. So.
Ta, Rahul.
Isn't Sue going next?
Yes, Sue is going
Thank
next.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I think it's a 3. And for me, the breakthrough moment was realizing that while my skills and background may not be relevant in the age of AI, it all depends on where I am physically. So the context of where I am makes me more relevant or irrelevant. And that journey took me from being a product leader to a go-to-market leader. And that happened because I was part of a startup where I was one of the co-founders and heading product. And they didn't need a product person because AI was doing all of it. But what they did need was understand how to sell it. And it was a struggle because it was about a year ago. All the SaaS rules were out the window, and we're like, how do we price this AI product? How do we stop bleeding? So I made the transition, and that kind of helped me understand that it is, times are uncertain, but there are still companies and startups that require my skills. And so what I do is I do that, and then I also upskill myself. And thanks to my group at Sidebar, we had some people, some early adopters of AI 2.5 years ago, who started talking about it and kind of got me into it. So I feel like I caught the wave at the right time. So yeah, I'm a 3.
Thank you. Now, Rahul.
Thanks, guys. Well, I guess I'm in a AI native startup. So I'm here because I probably was like a 6 out of 5. So I decided to act on it, I guess. But I think I would probably get 5 on 5, right? Pretty much no matter what point in time you ask me this question in my career, because I believe in that kind of healthy paranoia, like that sort of keeps you learning and keeps you going. I guess that's more of a philosophy than anything else, I think. But I think with everything else that's going on, I think we were talking about this yesterday. Like, we're not just faced with a new technology that very few of us understand or can keep up with the pace, I think how I was mentioning. We're also going through that change in times of economic uncertainty, political instability, like what have you. So I think the paranoia, I think, is very, very real and probably needed, right? Almost like a survival mechanism for humans.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, I'm probably 4 to 5, given the day. And I've been in AI for 10 years, so it's not like I'm a pessimist. But I think it's not just AI, as Rahul just said. I mean, tech in general is having a midlife crisis. It's not pretty. There's a lot of economic uncertainty, some of it driven by AI, some of it not, including tariffs. I think there's a political uncertainty beneath all of this that is sort of a new fever dream. Every day you wake up and read the paper, and just a lot of intentional fear in the system right now, and dysfunction. And I even went to Canada a few weeks ago, and like, what does it even mean to be an American? Like, we're not like, the world doesn't view us the same, and so I think, like, what does it mean to be like a good leader in all of this is challenging. How do we not go crazy as a good leader? But when I'm talking to a bunch of startup teams and big companies, I see, like, fear of uncertainty and falling behind, shame at not knowing and sort of having an imposter syndrome about AI, dread about, what's going to happen to their company or them personally. And I'm running into a lot of denial, which I think is a perfectly understandable strategy in a time like this. But I think we're all assessing this from a fear perspective. But I do have my days where I'm also in denial. And, as they say, denial isn't just a river in Egypt.
Thank you, Emily.
Jason with the jokes. I like it. So I've been in Sidebar for 2 years and had the same group, and I think my group would categorize me as someone that's either a 1 or a 5 on any given day. I don't know exactly what that says about me, but I think I don't operate in the middle. I operate on the edges. Being in marketing and growth, I have to operate as a 5. I think maybe I'm a little bit unique on this call because I'm not necessarily the product leader, but marketing and growth are known for being on the edge of trends. And I saw someone in the chat mention like ageism. That is something I am constantly fearful of within marketing. I remember seeing this when I was a baby marketer with social and having leaders above me not quite understand how Facebook and Instagram worked and thinking about how irrelevant they were. And I'm trying to constantly avoid that. So I would say I'm probably on a 5 today, because of the uniqueness of being in marketing and content creation and growth ops. Like all of that is really just being dominated by evolutions in AI that there's no way any of us could keep on top of it. So that's sometimes where I also go into a 1 and denial, because like we can only do so much. So yeah, I think we're all probably like the top 1% of AI learners, and we're still not feeling confident.
Thank you, Emily. I am just so surprised at how consistently high these numbers are, given how accomplished and cutting edge and industrious this group is. So thank you all for sharing. I'm curious now, what's surprising you, and what implications does it have for you and what you've heard? And for this round, it'll just be an open order of shares. So please go ahead, whoever wants to jump in.
I'm just surprised that I'm not alone, I guess. So it's just actually a good thing. So
Does that
everyone's
have,
pretty high. Everyone's pretty high. And probably rightfully so.
and what implications does that have for you, Raul?
I think the positive side is sort of gives me like, I guess more confidence that, like I said, like I can sort of talk about this with people, right? And actually get thoughts about like how they're approaching it, which I guess I'm looking forward to doing it today here. And we've been talking about this in my sidebar group as well. Like I think we're pretty open about some of these things. And I think the level of vulnerability is very, very high, which is what makes it real. So I think I'm looking forward to having those conversations. So now that I know that Ha is also a 5, right? Or she said like 3 or 4, like whatever that is. But
4 or
yeah,
5.
4
4
or
or 5.
5, yeah. It's pretty high. I would not have expected like high numbers from Jason, Ha, etc., which is good.
Well, I would say that it's so interesting because I do think we live in the LinkedIn, Instagram generation, right? Where like what you're posting on LinkedIn, may or may not be real life, or may not be true or authentic to everybody's situation. And um, I try to keep it real, but but I think from the outside, if people were to like read my post, they're like, "Oh, she's so successful and she's has it made." And then you get into the cyber groups and you kind of realize that everybody has the same like imposter syndrome, the same fears and uncertainty. So I plus one to what you said, Raul, like just knowing you're not alone and being able to talk with other leaders who like understand where you're coming from and can deeply empathize, but then also it is learning, right? Like I'm constantly wanting to learn from you, Raul, from you, Jason, from Sue. Emily, we need to do more projects together because I feel like I should be learning from you. But just like, like I'm not afraid to say to Jason, and even though we're not in the same circle, but we've gotten to know each other from cyber, it's like, Jason, where do I even get started? Like I feel like I'm way behind on AI. Like, like what podcast should I be listening to? Like, should I be spending my time vibe coding or building agents, or should I, what should I do? And I know Jason will have like a smart answer for me. So, so I think to answer the second part of your question of like, like I just know that I found a group or a community that like can, has the same insecurities as I have, same imposter syndrome, and yet like we're all supportive and we help each other work through it. So, I just need to remember now to schedule more one-on-one conversations with some of my friends in cyber and beyond.
Yeah, I think
Nice.
I was just gonna say like one thing I've found, the way this relates to sidebar and for me is that oftentimes it's like a introspection and then like reflect and then solve. And I think the reflection is, okay, check, we're all coming from a fear-based place. And now the response to fear is like fight, flight, freeze. And like I can't sit and reflective for too long, because I feel like I need to help solve. And I don't think the solution is, you know, just read a bunch, like force more things on my plate, I guess is the way I would put it. Like, how do you work smarter, not harder? And so, yeah, I guess that's the piece that I'm really reflecting on is, okay, we know there's a problem. How do we fix it without burning ourselves out?
That's kind of what comes through for me as well from this conversation, is that though everyone's high on 4 or 5s, but everyone has this drive to learn and be better and improve and evolve. And I think that is so important. And we have these kinds of opportunities very rarely in life where the entire world around you is forcing you towards two things. One, learn and evolve, but also hold on to your core values and, be with your people, speak to them, be vulnerable, share what you're going through, and learn together. I always feel like you learn better when you learn together. So I love that that's coming through from this group where everyone's talking about how their fears, but then there's also this optimism about let's learn and grow, and we've got to ride this wave.
Sue, I love that. Just, I mean, building up on what you're saying there in terms of learning together, I think it's pretty terrifying to do this by yourself. And I think it's easy, as Emily said, to just try and read a bunch of papers and feel stressed out because you don't understand everything in them generally. Just as an aside, my neighbor is a psychiatrist, and we go for walks every couple times a week. And psychiatrists and therapists in the Bay Area, you can't find one that will take you because they are totally maxed out, which I just find is a fascinating sort of insight. And like sidebar is not therapy, but it's a little bit therapy. As a group of people who are facing the same problems, I think this kind of discussion is super helpful.
Nice. So I'm hearing, no, you're not alone. Be okay to be open about adapt, and then work with other people so that you don't have to tackle it alone either. I love it. Well, and given that, I wonder if you had one skill that you could master in the next 100 days to future-proof yourself, what would it be?
I'll start. I think I need to be much better about this. Curiosity and a learner's mindset. So almost remembering the time when we were, back in elementary school, and the world is our oyster, and we're just like hungry and just like constantly learning and new skills and new disciplines and everything else. Like I feel like sometimes like in tech, it's easy to almost like forget and get away from that. And especially now with ChatGPT, it's like it's kind of crazy. It like kind of thinks for me, right? Like I give it a prompt and then it says, and would you like me to do this for you? And I'm like, well, yes, I would, and and then I was like, okay, I just did this. Would you like me to put this together in a framework or a doc? And I was like, sure, go for it. And and it actually, I think, can lead to intellectual atrophy. I so admire my business partner. I think that he is like an intellectual powerhouse, but like he's really good at asking questions, really good. And I feel like I need to just get better at like just curiosity, asking questions, learning again, because it is so easy to just do the work and forget to learn.
I love where you went with this, Ha. It's not like I want to learn about agentic, blah, blah, blah. It's like a values-based or leadership-based skill, which I think is honestly probably all you really can learn in about 100 days. So maybe in the similar vein, I also take a lot of inspiration from being both a parent and a partner, and watching a 3-year-old figure something out. Like it might not be the way that you would have done it, but it makes sense to them. And so like understanding how to operate when you have a lack of control, especially with AI and uncertainty about our political future, uncertainty about a lot of things, learning how to really unlock your desire for control and what not having that can give you.
And
If anyone can figure out how to do that in 100 days, I think I will all the thoughts.
Nick?
And what you just said like resonated a lot. Like I think I'm a parent of like 2 kids, and very recently, 2 and 10 days now, and they're like, I mean, it's like AI, right? Like, so it's clearly I can see thinking happening. They're so curious every single day. They're learning. Like the thought is like, how do you preserve that kind of curiosity all your life? And I guess like in this day and age, we are being presented with a chance, almost like a necessity to be able to do that. Like, so to how your point, like I think it's all about, the core skill sets that, are transferable, no matter like, what we do in the future. Critical thinking, first principles based understanding of a problem, of a solution. I think that's what's going to keep us going.
Rahul, that makes so much sense. And I was smiling ear to ear because one thing that I did when my kids were little, they're still little, but not as little as yours, is just observing them. And with curiosity also came the naivety and bravery to fail. I would see them keep trying, try the same thing over and over again, keep failing, but then try. I think that's one skill I'd want to develop in this next 1 year is to take chances and just be brave and learn, fail, and don't wait for it to be perfect. Just go for it because the world's moving really fast and it's okay to fail. It's not embarrassing anymore. So yeah, that's one skill.
Jason?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'd say a couple. One is I've been looking like this is not the first big information tech shift we've been through. And there was the dot-com stuff, but even further back, there's sort of like when we got PCs. And like there's a lot of wisdom actually there because, people have been, and that was probably a bigger shift than what's happening now. And I mean, there are so I had a business school professor said, you were probably like in middle school when this came out, but like here's a book by Peter Drucker, Managing Times of Great Change. And he's like, there's a bunch of stuff in there that's you're gonna laugh about because it's outdated, but a lot of the principles there are really important. It was like thinking through like what's happened kind of historically, and how others have managed this as leaders and managers is something that I'm just trying to spend more time on, rather than spending every day like reading the information or listening to my podcast about what new model dropped yesterday, balancing that out a little bit with that longer term perspective that we can bring into the current moment.
So much wisdom. I love it. Thank you all. I'm looking at the time. We're about halfway through our hour. Is there any other final thoughts that anybody wants to share before we move on to our solve? All right. Well, towards the end, I'll ask everybody for their insights across this meeting. So if there's anything that percolates, we'll have time to come back to them. All right. Well, thank you all for that part. Let's move on to our sidebar solve process. So we have, Jason has very graciously volunteered to be in our hot seat today. And let me tell you about the roles and process we're going to follow. So Jason is our sharer in the hot seat. Everybody in this fishbowl is the peer coaches, right? So we're going to try and help Jason work through this challenge. And then everybody online watching in, you're the observer. Listen, drop any resources you have in chat as they come up. And then I'm going to share this sidebar solve process in the chat here. We typically take 5 steps where the first person, Jason, is going to share his challenge, why it's important and what kind of support he's looking for. And then someone else is going to restate the challenge back for Jason. And this is such a wonderful practice because it's a way to reflect back and hear it said through somebody else's filter. And then we'll ask coaching questions. So what and how questions, because we don't want to give advice until we know we have the full context. We know we're not recommending something Jason's already done. And then once we feel like we have the full context or enough, then we can advise. And then we'll move to committing to next steps. The bonus step is that I'd like everybody who is not Jason to really take that extra thought to be like, how is this going to apply to me? What do I do? So that we're all taking away value from this. Sound good? All right, marvelous. Jason, tell us your challenge. Why is it important and what kind of support you need from us?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a whole new cohort of startups launching a StartX right now. It's a fall cohort. So I'm spending a bunch of time, almost full time, the last couple of months working with founders and founding teams. And they're excited, but they are also full on freaked out. They're for a lot of the reasons that we talked about, but it's even more existential to them because, you know, is their first startup going to fail and all of that? And I've had a successful startup, so, you know, they're kind of like, you know, Dad, what do we what do we do? And I think that one of the things I try and do is to just sort of like deeply listen, which is, you know, part of just founder therapy and what I'm supposed to do. I think that the challenging part for me is, you know, like I more often than not don't have an answer. And that is like I'm very type A and you know, like part of the reason I did this is because I thought I had a lot of answers for founders, but it's a bit of a different time. And so just like not having an answer is, you know, you can listen, but then they kind of want to hear a little bit of advice at the end. You know, I think kind of just getting comfortable with that, using that productively, which I probably don't always, you know, just, you know, kind of being vulnerable with them without further freaking them out or further freaking me out, because I think we all have to kind of maintain our sanity here. And we've talked about kids in this a little bit, and I think the one like useful analogy I've got is I've done a lot of youth soccer coaching, and when you've got inexperienced players, especially when they're younger, you know, and a ball just gets booted downfield and is, you know, just hurtling towards them, you know, their instinct is to just sort of kick it back, you know, as hard as possible, or just to like freeze, and the ball just hits them and rolls out of bounds. But it's definitely, you know, sort of like fire ready aim. It just doesn't work, and it's happening too fast for them. And it's, you know, it's usually it's fear or it's just reaction. And so what I have encouraged, you know, my teams to do is like you've got to slow down. And you know, to extend that soccer analogy, you know, you got to like use some part of your body to like slow the ball down, you know, get control. It's all about ball control. Then you've got a whole team, right? So you need to figure out, you know, who to pass it to, and you know, you're not necessarily having the answer to score the goal, but you're getting yourself through kind of the next part of the game without, you know, and sort of laying the groundwork for your team to be successful. And I'm having some success with that, but it still then flips back to relatively specific tactical questions, where you know my main answer is I don't know, which is pretty uncomfortable to be, for a leader, and it's almost worse to be for, you know, kind of like a leader or an advisor of startups who really expect you to have, you know, they're like, what is the damn answer? And I'm like, I don't know.
Jason,
It's challenging.
do you want a bottom line for us?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like being a leader and not knowing is hard right now. And you know, being vulnerable without freaking everybody out, including myself, is harder said than done.
Nice, really nice. All right, team.
Before we start, I just want to say that is so relatable, Jason. So thank you for sharing this challenge. But I think a lot of us in the room are like, we get it. So thank you for sharing this.
Agreed. Ha, do you want to take a stab at doing the restate?
Ooh, I'm kind of bad at it, but I think Jason did a good job bottom lining, which is, you know, he is positioning himself as a startup advisor. He's advising startups. He's seen as the wise, seasoned leader. And these young founders are looking to him for the answers. And, at this moment in time, like the answers aren't so obvious. And he's balancing between like, do I just say things because I'm expected to versus like being real and vulnerable with these founders, and being relatable and just admitting that sometimes you don't know, and that's okay.
How's that landing with you, Jason?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's spot on. And how you're right, the temptation to make shit up is high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's get our coaching hats on. What questions do we have? What are we curious about? Emily.
In your leadership style, how do you balance authenticity and kind of showing your vulnerability with also confidence and like putting forward a more secure, like how do you balance those two just in your leadership style?
That's a great question. I think it depends, right? I think like in my better moments or my worst moments, I think in my worst moments, which is like when I tend to be like fearful or maybe in a culture that I'm not comfortable in, I'll just like put on my armor. And they're just sort of like, Jason seems like a really strong guy. I can't really like see through the visor that he's got, but I think that is like me at my worst. I do think me at my best is really as more of a coach, as opposed to somebody who has all the answers, and is the general. And I think when you're a coach, you can say, this is hard, maybe some of us are going to fail, some of us are going to get laid off. But I think that's part of being authentic, honestly. But it's hard. And I think I will say that I think vulnerability, guys are worse at it. And I've got two sisters, and I'm definitely worse than they are.
Next question. Sue.
Jason, does your team typically come to you for, I'm sure for both, which is psychological support and looking to someone who has all the answers, but also for tactical actions and measures in place to improve themselves? Are you more focused on one compared to the other? Are you looking at how do you comfort them, or how do you kind of put an action plan in place for them to work on?
They always start with action plans and like, how can you help me with this? And that is the easier part for me, right? As I'm like, you're a founder. I mean, like, this is the process. I've advised like 50 of you in the last year. I may not know what you should do with generative AI in a therapy app, but I can tell you what the process is and how to get the right answers. So I think that is, honestly, I'm way more comfortable there. I'm also very comfortable as an operator. I try not to like jump and take the driver's wheel from them. Although I want to sometimes.
Emily.
But just to close off, I mean, I would say that being like getting into that coaching, like how are you getting into that more vulnerable space with them? It happens slower.
Thank you.
Jason, as a former founder, I'm sure it's not the first time you've been in uncomfortable situations, and been able to navigate your way through it. Maybe what's an example of a previous really uncomfortable situation you've been in, and what did you learn from that, and how did you get yourself through the discomfort? Like, what can you pull from that in this situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not unusual, but we would probably been through like our 20th pitch for our seed round, and we were just getting brutal feedback. Like just go home. I think it is worth thinking about at that point, like, should we go home? I do think that we, sort of circled back and, we had enough sort of conviction about our idea. We also got some good feedback from an advisor who'd been, he's now a 3-time entrepreneur with 3 exits. And he said, you've at some point you've just got to tell the larger world, like, shove off, like I've got a vision of the future. You're living in the present. And you've just got to, you got to fall back on your grit and you just got to drive. That's not an easy answer. It doesn't mean you're sort of through the fear, but we were way too early for what we were doing. We were doing computer vision at Edge 10 years ago, which is like prehistoric. And there's being early and there's being like way early, and we were way early, but we sort of surfed our way through it. And things don't make sense like until you sort of look back at it and see the right steps. And if you've been through that before, it's easier to take on the next one.
In a regular session, I'd probably give the coaching time probably about 5 more minutes, but since we're running a little fast, I'm going to open the floor for advice. What advice do we have for Jason? Emily?
I think what I've heard from you is that, like, learning from your own experience, these founders need to kind of live through your knowledge. And a lot of that comes to life through instilling perseverance, grit, resilience, conviction. Like, I can imagine one analogy, I don't know if you meant to say this or not, was like a surfing analogy, where a lot of being a founder is just feeling like you're surfing a wave. You can't control it crashing on you, but you can at least learn to surf. And so I would say reminding them of the grit, resilience, conviction that they've had in the beginning to get through this next wave. Because it's not going to end, even if they magically get a seed round or Series A, like, and then what? So like being a founder it never ends.
Yeah.
So you really do have to learn to surf. And it sounds like that's the skill that you have that you need to coach and teach into them.
Rahul?
There's always another wave.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rahul.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, I think Jason, first up, like I think Ha said it, like I don't think it's unique to you, man. Like in the sense that, like, I guess every leader is living it in this day and age in every role they're at. I remember like going through this at Walmart too. Like people would just come to me for answers. They're like, give me the answer. I'm like, but I don't know the answer. In fact, it's a very weird, counterintuitive thing. Like people expect you to have more and more answers. And as leaders, we will actually have less and less answers really, because we're so far apart from the ground reality. And I think you are already very good at it. My only encouragement to you would be like you ask amazing questions. Maybe you just ask the founders back, like, what do they think, on how to approach a problem? And almost always I've seen people actually do have answers. They're looking for validation, and that might make your job easier.
I got so lost in Emily and Rahul's responses, so I had to take a moment to reframe mine. I think, Jason, I was thinking more about, focusing on things that you and your team can control, and then kind of muting that voice for a while that you cannot control. So the world around you, economic changes, keep it somewhere in the corner of the mind so you know that's coming and that could impact, but also focus on what you can do today really well, which is your well-being, building a great product, talking to customers about what you can do for them. So I think in hard times, I always find myself focusing on what I can do, what I can control. And I wonder if that's something as a leader you could do to help yourself and your team.
I'm going to squeeze in one piece of advice before we go back to Jason for next steps. But I also wonder if being vulnerable is as detrimental as you think. I might actually go back to the founder, do some experiments and be vulnerable and go back to the founder and see if it's landing the way you expect it to. All right, Jason.
Oh, wait,
go ahead, huh?
One more thought. So Jason, I think you know that at one point I was VC for 5 years. And I will tell you that founders hate when VCs or others give advice and they can see through it, which is like, this person doesn't have any fucking idea of what they're talking about. And so they might like nod and, and agree with you in the moment. And then, as soon as they leave the board meeting, they're like, we're not doing anything that VC said because he doesn't have any clue. So I do think that your approach is more authentic and more real, and I think should be more relatable to founders, which is, sharing your experience, what you've seen that's worked, that hasn't worked, recognizing that it may or may not apply today. I love Raul's advice of like, well, what do you think? But just being that like steady hand for them, and knowing that it's okay for us not to have the answers, but that you'll be there for them, as a sounding board, as a cheering partner for them. And you can give a perspective, even if it's not the right perspective, but that you'd be kind of in this together. I think it is just a much better approach working with founders. And some founders, it might not resonate. That's okay. There's other founders, and other founders will be like, oh, I really love working with Jason because he keeps it real. And he's not like my asshole VCs that I talk to on a regular basis. So anyways, but this is, by the way, like, I don't know if this recording gets public or not, but this is what I love about Cyber Circles, which is we can just say what we really feel. So.
Thanks, Ha. Jason, back to you. What insights are you taking away from this, and what do you see as your next steps?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as is relatively common in Sidebar, like you just you feel like you're not alone, but you also get a lot of like specific feedback. And, this just doesn't happen, over cocktails with your friends, especially in the Valley where everybody's, as Ha says, is trying to sort of put up a front on LinkedIn. So that's really useful. I mean, I think that it is sort of helping to tip the balance of a debate in my head of like, is it a really valuable role to be the founder therapist to some extent? And, a good therapist, asks a lot of questions and listens and then kind of holds up a mirror. Hopefully, you don't always see the mirror, but that's like the ideal thing that happens. And so it is like that part of being a leader in this advisory role is helpful. I think Emily's advice around, sort of sharing stories. I do have one that I'm sharing right now, and Ha, don't take this personally, but one of the VCs who was the harshest to us, a very famous guy with a big ego, when he saw, so that was 10 years ago, when he saw, 8 months ago that there was this acquisition announcement that we were being acquired, it was very public. Like the next day he called me and he's like, hey, let's get lunch. Let's talk about your next startup. And I said, like, do you have any idea what my perception of you is? And I'm like, no. And one, that felt great. But it also is like, you just got to know who to listen to. And sometimes it's your heart. But it's usually not like the people with, the guys on the Midas list necessarily. And I think that founders need to hear that when, they're funding and trying to get external validation. Generally, and in a hard funding environment, they need to be told they've got to keep going. And so even when I don't have the answer, one of the things telling the teams, like, one of the ways you're going to have the answer is to, really embrace your grit. Because that's the difference usually between a successful startup founder and not. So it's all really like helpful. And there is definitely as I said, there's kind of a safety in Sidebar where you can sort of tease out, like, what things can I not change that I just have to accept, and what things can I change that I just need courage to change. And I think discerning one from the other.
Jason, I want to make sure we have time for everybody to have insights, and JB has told me. So do you want a bottom line, and then we'll go around for insights?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like it's okay to be a coach. And I mean, I think, just sharing the, sort of insights I've got from my own personal experience.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much, Jason, for being in the hot seat and for sharing with us. It's really incredible. And thank you for sharing your insights and next steps. I want to hear from the rest of the team. Jason, who do you want to hear insights and next steps from?
Emily, because I don't know her very well, so I don't know what she's going to say.
Like for you, Jason or Jenny, or are
No,
we
just across this
general?
meeting, across this call.
It's funny, you actually just said something, Jason, that really resonated with me, that like take advice from the people that you trust, and listen to the people that you trust. I've actually just been through a really big transformation in my own personal role, having gone from a startup phase to a scale up phase, and I ended up getting layered. And I've just learned to really enjoy and take a lot of advice from the woman who layered me, just because we speak so much of the same language. Where I was in just a much tougher place when I was working with people that there wasn't as much trust, or there wasn't as much common language. And so it really is true that like in these times of uncertainty, focus on the people that you trust and really can lead you in the right way for you.
Thank you. Let's go Rahul, Sue, and then Ha. Go ahead, Rahul.
I think my next step is just grab dinner with Ha and Jason, I guess. Like we have so much to talk about. And I think there's a happy hour coming up. Ha, I think I saw that you're hosting. So let's see maybe. No, but I think on a serious note, I sort of reinforces that, some of what we go through is not something that we go through alone. Though we like to believe that we're all unique. I think the situations are pretty similar and shared. I'm going to take a lot of practical tips from what Emily and Sue and Ha and Jason shared today into what I go do in a weird way. Like I think I saw a lot of comments on vibe coding. I actually literally am creating vibe coding. So I'm going to take a bunch of this back there and figure out like how do we do this, while being, true to the innovation that we're up to. So thanks, Jason, for sharing this. I guess the takeaway for me is like it's okay to not have an answer. So
Nice. Nice. Over to you, Sue.
Thank you. For me, I mean, there's so much, but I cannot summarize it in 30 seconds. But for me, it's okay to feel two very different things at the same time. You could feel very uncertain and at unease, but also be excited and have a growth mindset and want to learn. So it's okay to have two paradoxical emotions at the same time. Like just go with it and do the best you can.
Ha.
Well, it's funny that Jason went through his solve, because to me, it's like every time I talk to you, Jason, I'm just like, oh, he's the wise, like seasoned leader. So I'm sharing this out now. I'm I'm gonna put together a series of like AI thought leadership dinners. Raul, you're invited. Sue, if you're in town, you can come and join a future one. But I wanted to be Jeffersonian style conversations. And I was like, I need a facilitator who's like knowledgeable about AI, seasoned, and like can draw out just great questions and advice. And I was like, oh, it's Jason. Let me call up Jason. Which we would never have gotten to know each other had it not been for Sidebar, Jason.
Yeah,
So
totally.
anyways,
Yeah.
so my bigger takeaway is just that like the people in this community are extraordinary. And I find myself like wanting to collaborate with so many of them. And I have collaborated with so many of them because they're just extraordinary. And I learn from them all the time. And so I really do view like not just my circle as my board of directors, but like the larger community. And that's my takeaway. Because so Jason, you are underselling yourself in your problem solving, because I find like I just want to listen to you all day long. So
Agreed. Well, and I also invite the audience, if you want to put any of your takeaways and solidify your actions by stating it in the chat, I invite you to do that. And we're all curious to hear it. I want to thank this fishbowl so much. You all shared so much wonderful wisdom. We've covered so much ground. Really appreciate you being here.